I'm now excited to introduce chef, entrepreneur, food advocate, and the author of the new book, The Kitchen Cookbook, which somebody is going to bring over here in a second. The new book, The Kitchen Cookbook, Cooking for Your Community, Kimbal Musk. Give him a round of applause. Joining him is the chair of the board of Unreasonable Group and the founder of Flourish Trust, Christiana Musk. They're married. Nice to see you both. Thanks so much for being here. While they're getting settled, lots of different books up here. You're going to be able to enjoy a recipe from Kimbal's book. It's a comforting tomato soup recipe, I believe, with urfa carrots, which are slow roasted and caramelized. It sounds delicious. So I'm so glad you could all be here. Go to the QR code in your program, and then you can get a signed book of Kimbal's cookbook. I'm going to lift it up real quick. His picture's on it. You can't miss it. He's wearing his hat. It's awesome. I have a copy at home that sadly I didn't bring to get signed, but I'm so glad we have copies here for all of you to pick up. And then we have another book. I don't have enough hands. We have Food Inc. 2, which accompanies the recent release of Food Inc. 2, the documentary, which was awesome. I had the privilege of being part of its release around Climate Week in September. Christiana wrote an amazing chapter about meat and livestock, and I also wrote a chapter. So
amazing chapter. Brilliant synthesis.
Thank you. Very kind. If you go to the QR code, you can get a signed copy by me and Christiana. So. Yay. All right. I'm so glad you could both be here. Thank you for coming. I know.
Great to be here.
I know you're both very busy.
Your stamina is so impressive doing all of these talks back to back, not just now, but for all of these years. We appreciate and admire you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dani.
You make me cry. It's that time of day where I'm becoming emotional. There's not one food tank summit that I haven't cried at.
I was just emotional in the last one with Blue Adams. That was just such an inspiring talk. Thank you so much. We've never met, but I was really moved.
Right. Such important work that Blue and so many other chefs who are living in Utah and really contributing to their community. So, but now I want to talk about you both. Kimbal, if I can start with you, this is your first cookbook, and that was kind of surprising to me. I think I just assumed that you had a cookbook. Why write this now?
Yeah, so I've had the kitchen restaurant in Boulder. We opened in Denver and Chicago over the past 20 years. And I did actually look at the cookbooks over the time. It just really wasn't, our food is very seasonal, so it changes with the seasons. We work with a lot of bespoke farmers, and doing a cookbook required somewhat of a consistent menu.
Right.
And over 20 years, though, we actually do have quite a few recipes we do. We might do them seasonally, but we do have, and they're really good. And so I thought it would be a fun thing to do for the 20th anniversary.
That's so great. And I feel like this book, because it is so beautiful and it's like hardbound, it's really nice. It's a hefty cookbook. It's sort of like it's a huge process to write a book of any kind, but I feel like for cookbooks, it's also kind of like making a film because you're doing so much photography and so much sort of
You're trying to also create a personality for the book. You want people to have a takeaway. For what I loved today really was hearing everyone talk about the power of community.
Right.
And for me and the kitchen, we came into it with this idea of a restaurant, Boulder's Community Bistro. It's Boulder, Colorado. And that also led us to get to know the farmers in our community. And we felt like we were a better member of our community by being connected to our local farmers. And then it also led us to working in schools, helping kids grow food in their classrooms, in their outdoor classrooms. And again, that was all about community. And I've just heard it so much today.
Yeah.
The power of community for happiness, for mental health, for, of course, eating well and enjoying your food. But we cook with our kids or ourselves at minimum once a day, sometimes twice a day.
Right.
And in the weekends, obviously lunch as well. But for me, food is the gift you give yourself 3 times a day. Make it a good one.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And Kimbal, you can clap. What I like about the cookbook is that it is for home cooks. It's not complicated. There's not a long list of ingredients.
We have thousands of recipes that we had to choose from, and we really did choose the ones that people could cook at home. Some of them, like the tomato soup you guys will get to try today, is actually the simplest recipe. it's so simple you can't even believe that it is that simple.
Right.
It's got to be. Shouldn't you add something to make the tomato soup taste good? And it's actually just very good tomatoes with some onions and blend it up, and it's ready to go.
So you can taste the ingredients that those
Yeah.
farmers worked so hard
Exactly.
for, right?
Yeah.
I'll come back to you in a minute, Kimbal, but Christiana, I want to turn to you. You did write this wonderful chapter for Fooding too, and I'm wondering if you can share with us, because knowing you for so long, you've compiled so much research over the last, I don't want to date you, but like 20 years maybe, around the impacts of livestock on the environment. How do you translate that into a chapter that's maybe, 2,000 words?
I think I had maybe the longest chapter in there, but yeah, thank you. No, I started, I guess, from the time I was a kid, I've been a really passionate environmentalist. My deep love for animals, my deep love for ecology, and my deep love for humanity and all of humanity. And that's, even from back the time I was a kid in my first environmental club, we knew like meat is this messy, uncomfortable, difficult topic to talk about when you talk about the environment. And throughout my stages of, research and in my career, I kind of went deeper and deeper into working on this messy, very uncomfortable topic.
Right.
And, at one point, and I think around the time we started to get to know each other, I was running an organization which was doing research synthesis, trying to help people understand the global impact of our livestock system, so which people didn't understand.
Right.
People talked like with climate about transportation and energy generation, but no one wanted to talk about meat, and nobody really understood the aggregate issues. And so 95% of our global population eats meat. It's deeply embedded in our culture, and we consume about 70 billion land-based animals a year, and looking to possibly double that by 2050.
Right.
And so I would be on global stages from the United Nations to, the dietary guidelines work that we did in 2015, trying to highlight the importance of starting to try to look at what kinds of policies at scale could we address for sustainable consumption and reducing our animal food consumption. But I'd be positioned like kind of against somebody on stage that would be saying, actually, livestock could be really beneficial for the environment, and in fact, meat is great. And then, somebody else saying like, well, if we could just like scale the efficiencies in our supply chain, we can reduce the emissions by XYZ. And then, somebody else saying, oh, forget livestock altogether, we're just going to make meat, right? And we would just argue in front of policymakers, and we would argue in front of our audiences, and then everybody would leave confused.
Right.
And it just felt like, oh my goodness, this like divisiveness around meat, yes, in our science communities, in our policy communities, and around the dinner table, is not helping us with this really urgent issue that we need to deal with within timelines that really matter, and that is deeply personal to us in our hearts and to animals. And so, around the time that we lost the dietary guidelines campaign,
9 years ago now.
I know, in 2015, which was this fight to include sustainable thinking in how we design our dietary guidelines in the U.S., which affects $16 billion of federal procurement, so it's a big deal. I decided to go back and research and start trying to understand, why do we disagree about meat and sustainability so much? Why can't we get our act together on this? Why can't just the facts be the facts, right? And what I did is, my research method was discourse analysis of reading watching and coding hundreds of speeches on meat and sustainability, and looking for patterns in how do people frame the problem? How do they even frame sustainability in the first place? What do people even think sustainability is? What do they frame the solution as? And then, what data are they sourcing? Like, who do they look to for sources of truth? And when I kind of mapped and clustered all these together, I found that there were kind of 4 different, let's call them worldviews, when we talk about meat and sustainability. And then I kind of gave them names that were kind of memorable, but the improvers that are trying to improve sustainability through the whole supply chain. The reducers that are saying like, hey, we don't need to meet this demand anyway. Why don't we just reduce the amount of meat we eat? We've got plenty of food. The regenerators who are saying like, we also don't need to meet demand. What we need to do is start raising our animals in harmony with the environment, just like our ancient practices of wild animals. And the disruptors who are saying, actually, let's bypass livestock altogether and just make man-made meat.
Yeah.
And so, and I'll go.
I think what's really wonderful about each one of those groups, because in this world there's a lot of argument and a lot of it's an emotional argument.
Right.
And Christiana does a good job of not villainizing any of the
Absolutely.
views, but rather saying, here's how they think. It's more like it's helping you understand how other
Right.
people are thinking.
Right.
And they genuinely are thinking, they don't think they're a villain, regardless of which position you're in. And I think that really is one of the most powerful things about her work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think like what I'm arguing for there is that we, if we can transcend these debates and if we can be aware of our own both biases and also our passions, but our each of these different worldviews has a shadow of something they're not looking at in the system. And when we look at a population that's growing to 10 billion people on this planet, like if we truly want to nourish humanity sustainably, we're going to need all of these different stakeholders to be a piece of the puzzle so that we can create this next evolution of our food system.
Yeah, and I love how that you've really been able to have uncomfortable conversations that are fruitful, right? You've been able to talk to all of these different groups and come up with things that are really solid, and that's what the chapter really does. I want to talk to you a little bit, if you can. I'd love your opinion on those disruptors. Are we going to see a future of cultivated, cultured, slaughter-free meat? Is that where we're going towards?
Well, I think it's, a piece of the puzzle, and especially when you read my chapter, I get a little deeper into the why behind that. So big question for me, like when, we kind of, is like, why is the current system of meat production working? Like what works about it? Because it's clearly winning. And it's all in the 10,000 years of agriculture that we've had, we really created factory farming as a new way of raising meat, really like less than 100 years ago, and kind of scaled it in the 1940s and 1970s. So, but it's working. It's like scaled all over the world. And this is how we make meat. And what it works is that it's able to provide people animal protein at equitable and affordable prices, like for the most part. So now in a world where throughout all of human history, most people couldn't have access to enough meat to have health and nutrition there for their family, now they do in the course of just 1 century. And because the meat industry has really focused on safety and access and affordability for the whole world, that's why they're winning. And that's why, and so basically it's a challenge for people who care about more plant-based foods and people who care about more regenerative and responsible animal welfare base to try to get that access, right, and scale that affordability. And the disruptors are the only other ones who are saying, we also care about this access and affordability and scale. But we, instead of trying to just squeeze more milk out of the cow, and squeeze more meat out of this animal by making it more efficient, we're going to use technology to do so and there's several different types of technologies ranging not just from the cell base, but also from companies that, sequester carbon from the air to make meat out of carbon, right? And mycelial meat. So I think like what I try to say is it's a worldview of saying like we want to try to make meat. And there are risks to any time you introduce novel technologies into the diet. I think one of the most beautiful things about being with Kimbal is he's, very passionate about technology, but you'll see in the book, like everything is real food. Like Kimbal's always been back to real food, you know? And I think ideally we have a world where those who, appreciate and value real food can access it, and those who, are like appreciating some of the benefits of the novel food technologies can access those.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kimbal. That makes me want to turn to you as a chef and someone who cares deeply about food and agriculture and also technology. How do you sort of combine all those things and come up with menus and ideas that will translate into whatever, recipes in your book or whatever you want to sort of, whatever kind of information you want to give eaters?
I think we've actually, going through the past couple decades, we've tried putting things on the menu that were, like Beyond Burgers or Impossible Burgers, and to support the industry to see if it would work with our style of cooking and our approach. And frankly, it just didn't work. It wasn't that there was a certain amount of people that wanted it. It's just we just don't have we don't love the processed nature of it. We don't feel like it's really that good for you, and we don't really like the word healthy. We are not a healthy restaurant, but we have really good French fries, and trust me, there's better than that tomato soup, and we love all that stuff. But really, it's this that's not the same thing as putting something on the menu that's highly processed that's probably not good for you. And so I think we really struggled with it. In the lab-based meat, I'm actually more optimistic because it really is meat, and I think that it's about taste and it's about price, but it has the potential to taste really good, and it has potential to be very affordable, and of course then you don't have the animal welfare to worry about. But I think that it's got to feel right. The food in the cookbook in our restaurant, it's just good. It's just, wow, this is an interesting angle on carrots, or this is an interesting angle on tomato soup, but at the end of the day, we try our best to have a very small amount of ingredients for each recipe, and very high quality ingredients. We helped start the farm to table movement. 20 years later, farmers are all digital. They're now part of the system, which is really cool. Almost every great restaurant now does work with local farmers, and it's wonderful to see that. And so, but again, it always comes back to is it real food? Can you explain it to your grandmother?
Right.
Is sort of I think a Michael Pollan.
There's a lot of great beans out there yet to be discovered.
Yes, exactly. Actually, Mexican food, not the kind of Mexican food you guys probably are familiar with, tacos and so forth. There's another style of Mexican food we're starting to see, and that is just different kinds of corn and different kinds of beans and different kind of textures. And when we're at the kitchen, what we see is we believe that American food is the melting pot. So we have we have the license to use the latest approaches to corn from Mexico, or we'll go even to Turkey and see how they do a certain style of food, and we do take it into our recipes. But right now, I think when it comes to the actual ingredients, the variety of ingredients and the variety of textures coming out of Mexico right now it's probably the most exciting food scene that I've seen in a while.
That's exciting. I do want to shift gears a little bit, because you are obviously this amazing power couple who do different things, but you've also come together on a fairly new foundation called the Flourish Trust. And I'm wondering if you can both talk about it in sort of the context of Sundance, because I think the philanthropy arm of what you're doing is so important. So Christiana, if I can turn to you.
Yeah, well, maybe I'd love you to share with Big Green and the community through Big Green that you've been building.
We had one of the
okay.
Yeah, of course.
When the kitchen was helping kids in food, we started building classrooms for kids in schools. We realized it was a really big problem. Like, we really needed to help. So we actually formed a nonprofit. It's called Big Green. By the time COVID hit, we had built 650 outdoor classrooms across the country. Beautiful, wonderful things. And then COVID came along and said, you're not allowed to do that. It was literally against the law to work on school grounds for 2 years. And so we pivoted to supporting a community of nonprofits. And we used a technical term called a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization. And what it enables, all these nonprofits vote together on who should receive funding in our community. So rather than Kimbal making that decision in my beautiful ivory tower in Boulder, which is literally
we don't really have ivory towers in Boulder.
But I mean, but I've been trying to decide who should receive funding in a difficult neighborhood in Atlanta. That's unfair. I mean, I don't know, but we can now leverage the knowledge of our community members in our community that know folks in Atlanta, and they do the voting of where the funding goes. And so Big Green DAO is, again, coming back to the theme of community, it's building this incredible community of nonprofits that are helping Americans grow food, schools, at home, and community gardens. So check it out at biggreen.org. It's really beautiful.
It's very democratized. I love it. I mean, I think that's a key element of this, where you have communities sort of voting on themselves and each other, and coming together to make these decisions.
There's this weird power dynamic in the nonprofit world where nonprofits are worried about or just don't understand how grants are given. And frankly, on the other side, the foundations don't fully understand how the nonprofits use the money. There is a disconnect going on. And so the idea was, let's democratize it. Donors get a vote, but also the nonprofits get a vote. And actually what is the outcome is, once a year, we get together in Denver, and this past year was 150 nonprofits. 150, like, it's really cool.
Awesome.
From the smallest neighborhoods around the country, just in the US, and sharing all of their learnings, whether it's how to grow food in these climates, or just basic accounting, or how to use Excel, Google Docs. These are skills that folks need, and they can share it, and it's just a sharing of knowledge that happens because the community is formed, and they have voting rights. So the more they're connected to the community, the more likely the community will vote for them to receive more funding. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy of building community.
Very cool. Do you want to add to like what the Flourish Trust has been able to do over the last year or so?
Sure. So, I mean, obviously, it's a great honor and privilege for me to get to work on philanthropy in this space after being an activist for so long and caring so much about this food system work. There's so many important, amazing food leaders out there. And for me, I felt like, trying to have a bit more of like a strategy around key areas that I thought we could make a difference, that were bigger wedges in a shorter time period. And for me, one of those big ones is food waste. Because this has always been like our most solvable food system problem, that we waste a third of the world's food.
And we don't compost.
Yes, well, but composting is like, we want compost, but like we want a food feed to people. Like we want to not grow too much food to start with. Like we want to grow the right amount of food, and then the food, then we want to feed it to people. Like, because if we have people that are hungry while we're putting food in landfills where it's turning into methane and turning into waste, is just like absolutely ridiculous in this day and age. The other thing is like, there's no real like enemy of food waste. Nobody's like, I want to keep wasting food. People don't like the rules and regulations that you might, and the policies that could create extra costs and restrictions. But we really have this amazing opportunity worldwide to really tackle this and to feed more people. So that has been a place where we've had a bit more of a strategy where we're kind of focused on big levers. And we are so excited to see that FarmLink is here today. So please, nobody leave after our session. Everybody stay for the short film of FarmLink, because they're just like it's really like how do food systems change as social movements, right? Yeah. And so I really feel like FarmLink is starting a social movement around food waste. It's really exciting. And then another big one is regenerative agriculture. Because we really, we need to start growing food in harmony with nature and natural patterns, and that really starts with replenishing our soil.
Sure.
And regenerative agriculture is I think it's at the time to have its moment where people are finally starting to understand it, and finally starting to understand. I mean, the big things are like at the federal policy level, at the state policy level, how we can start supporting and motivating and incentivizing farmers to start planting cover crops. And this really, like, again, back to social movements, like how do you get people to start caring about these issues and connecting the dots? And back to film and why we're here at Sundance, another one of our grantees is Common Ground Film that you guys are also going to show tonight. And so I think that Kimbals would talk for years, like everybody calls everything regenerative this, regenerative that, and blah, blah, what does it even mean? And I remember in the first 20 minutes that we watched that film, he was like,
yeah,
it was a pretty good definition of regenerative agriculture.
The movie's great.
Thank you.
Put 80 people in the room.
Thank you.
We're not going to leave this room until we decide what regenerative is. And they did. It came up with, there were 5 elements that if you did these 5 things, you were regenerative.
Right.
And that's really, it was needed. Because I've been in this world now for 2 decades where so people put a label on something all the time, and it's pretty exhausting, actually.
Absolutely.
Now what is that? And the Rodale Institute actually did a regenerative organic label, very much a certified label. I get behind things like that very, very quickly. But this movie was the first time I saw like hey, let's get our community together and decide what this is.
Yeah, really important. Christiana?
Yeah, so I mean, just to summarize, like the mission of Flourish Trust is to catalyze the healing and regeneration of humanity and our planet. And I think that there's just no better intersection of those than food. And, and then when we talk about film is just this thing, and documentary film that we're all here for is this incredible way of storytelling and connecting people to the love of food and the incredible people on the ground who you do such a great job of like shining a light on, but like telling their stories and bringing people in connection with the love of their food for just that healing of their own minds and bodies and our communities as we cook together and, farm and grow food together. But also, to really start to grow this food movement that is also our climate movement and also our ecological regeneration movement.
Right.
Like, film is one of our greatest vehicles to be able to do that storytelling. And I think my kind of call would be to philanthropists to understand this as a great medium to be able to help support these causes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Kimbal, any final words? What's your advice for other family foundations who want to get in the film world?
In the film world or food world?
Food and film
Food
world.
and film. Well, I will say actually food and film together, watching the power of film and how it gets the message across, especially when a movie takes off. We work also in mental health, and there's some incredible movies here that get the message out about things like ibogaine and others that really you couldn't get it out otherwise. So I think it is a wonderful use of philanthropic dollars to get into film. On the food side, I can't say enough. There's the work you do, the things you support. I think foundations should look to Food Tank and
That's
and
very
learn.
kind.
No, really, I think you're really a wonderful curator of.
Fishing.
We've been on this journey for a long time, so it's wonderful to see you do the curation and also write your chapter.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Christiana.
No, I was going to say, you told me you went to, I mean, we know you separately, but you were saying you went to a food, like one of
I went to
your
the
very...
first Food Tank, and it was a small event, and it was great. And I was like, oh, cool. Let's see what,
And
what can
we were
happen
trying to say
now.
how long ago was that?
11 years now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Talk about stamina.
I love them. They're the greatest. Thank you both so much for being here. Remember to read and buy Fooding 2 or become a Food Tank member and get a signed copy from Christiana and Dani. And then also, this comes out March 14th.
No, it's March 12th. You can get
March
that
12th.
on any bookstore as well as Amazon. And
Pre-order,
just do a
but-
search Kimbal Musk cookbook, and you'll find it.
Both great books. Thank you both so much. It was so great to see you.
Thank you.
We're going to take our picture. Thank you. I'm gonna